Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1083 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. StickerU.com. Create custom stickers, labels, tattoos, and decals for your home and your business. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Doer, the world's most comfortable pants and shorts. Save 15% with the promo code TorontoMike. Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. And Canna Cabana, the lowest prices on cannabis, guaranteed. Over 100 stores across the country. Learn more at cannacabana.com. This week, telling musical tales from the label's perspective are Kevin Shea and Steve Waxman. Welcome, guys.
Hey, how you doing, Toronto Mike?
Wait a second.
What?
Well, this is hilarious. You could not have chosen two fellas more or less unlikely to be sponsored by beer or cannabis.
Or funerals, for that matter.
Are you guys what we call straight edge?
We are the only two promo guys, I think, in history who were able to successfully do our jobs without drinking to excess or smoking the jazz cigarettes.
Maybe that was your secret weapon, that you were always sober, where everybody else was getting trashed. You guys kept sober and could kind of wrangle, like herd the cats.
And be the designated driver.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I always thought that our secret weapon was our good looks.
So wait, am I to understand, gentlemen, that you will not be taking home any Great Lakes beer? Because if you're not, that means more for me. But what are you going to say there, Kevin?
We'll leave it with you or the next guests that come in as well. So there you go. Thank you,
Okay,
though.
for those who do drink, though, I'll just shout out Great Lakes beer because it's delicious, fresh craft beer for those drinker FOTMs. And the cannabis, man, if you're looking for cannabis, Canna Cabana will not be undersold on cannabis or cannabis accessories. And there's over 100 locations across the country. So there you go. The weed and the beer have been shouted out with my straight edge guests. Okay, Kevin, you've been on before.
I have. Yeah, we've talked about Bill
me.
Barilko. We've talked about Weird Al. We've talked about a few things through the years. And I'm a big FOTM too. So
you are a friend of Toronto Mike. Now, I'm going to tell the listenership that episode 216 is where you'll hear Kevin Shea for the first time on Toronto Mike. And here's what I wrote back then. I wrote, Mike chats with Kevin Shea about his years working with Weird Al Yankovic and Motley Crue.
Oh, yeah.
Selling Smells Like Teen Spirit to radio. By the way, consider those stories greatest hits. If they come back again today, I will not complain because those are the greatest hits. Oh, and we did do a lot of chatter about the legend of Bill Barilko. And that's because you kind of wear two hats. Like sometimes you're the music guy, sometimes you're the Maple Leafs hockey historian. Am I right?
Well, I try and juggle, but loving both, so it all works out.
All right, well, I'm glad you're back, buddy, because you're a beloved FOTM. Okay, there's a new FOTM in the house. The Waxman.
Cuckoo Cuckoo.
Yes, the walrus is Steve Waxman. Steve, I believe I phoned my buddy, another FOTM, Blair Packham, one day.
That's true.
And he answers the phone and he says he's at lunch with Steve Waxman. And I think he said you guys were chatting, or at least on the agenda for that lunch was what you could expect when you visited the TMDS studio here. Do I have that story at all right?
It is for the most part right. We were actually discussing our upcoming seminar at Canadian Music Week, which was fully attended, and and then he started talking about how great a guy you were and how much fun it is to be on this podcast. And I said to him, that's fantastic, because I called him once years ago to see if we could set something up on the podcast. He never got back to me. So it's great to be on the podcast.
Is that a true story, that last bit? Did you reach out and I ignored you?
Yep.
Can you tell me, were you reaching out to put some artist on the program? Tell me why you reached out.
Yep.
Who was it? I need to know.
It was.
I'm fascinated.
It was probably either Jim Cuddy or.
I would not know. I wouldn't have ghosted you for Jim Cuddy. No,
Okay.
and I don't think I would have ghosted you. I don't think I would have ghosted you for anybody, to be honest, because much like your friend here, Kevin Shea, I'm a sweetheart. But Jim Cuddy is actually a desired guest who has yet to make his debut.
So it was either Jim Cuddy or Scott Hellman. It was going to be. I would definitely think it was one of those two, and it was at a time when I always liked it. When I was a publicist, I always liked to think that I was a little bit ahead of the curve from everybody else.
Right.
Nobody would tell me that, so I had to tell myself that all the time. But I was an early adopter of podcasts, and I knew that your podcast was getting a lot of traction, and I wanted our artists to have an opportunity to take advantage of your traction.
Okay, so just, I've never deleted an email since 2004 when I switched to Gmail. So I'm looking at all this now. And I will tell you, I'm subscribed to your newsletter, Steve Wax. At least I was. Sorry, your Warner Music Canada News of the Day. Like, I can see here. So I just searched Steve Waxman in my Gmail.
Yeah.
Here's our exchange. I won't read it in case it wasn't fit for public consumption. I'm just going to glance at it here. So this is November 6th, 2018. It was basically a generic, hopefully we can work together in the future. And he says, I'm going to add you to our press release list if you don't mind, and then we can see what works for us or whatever. Yeah. And I wrote you back. I did not ghost you. See what's happening here, Kev? I wrote, sounds good. Send some awesome Warner talent my way, and then I put in a happy face, so there's a pleasant exchange. And then that was it. So I don't think you've got the right guy, Steve Waxman.
The ghost got ghosted.
I'm just looking here. So it's all mass. There's nothing personalized. I'm just glancing I'm on this list, Warner Music. I'm seeing lots of stuff, lots of interesting artists. Never again do I get a Steve Waxman email that's personalized.
That is...
So you owe me a huge apology.
I guess I owe your listening audience a huge apology, because I was telling them a story out of... Wow.
And this is the home of real talk, okay? Because I will tell you, obviously I know myself better than anybody, and you could pitch me the most horrible creature on earth, and I will send a polite reply back. I actually would reply to anybody about anything, even if I have no interest in what you're pitching.
Well, clearly I didn't count on you being able to be one of those people that never deleted an email. Oh my God, how much room is on that computer?
No, it's in the cloud, Steve, okay? It's in the cloud. But glad you're here, and shout out to Blair Packham, who is a tremendous FOTM, and he recently came back. And even when I was going through some shit with some... GTA personalities, I was getting the most supportive and wonderful notes almost on the daily, he was checking in on me to make sure I was okay. So much love to Blair Packham.
Has that eased now, or is it? Yeah.
Well, one of them is it's broken, so I just blocked and ignored, and he's screaming into the abyss because one of those people is broken. One of those people just decided never to acknowledge that this happened. So I've never heard a peep out of one of these people, and the other person has just sort of quieted down on this front, so it's sort of
just as well.
All the threats never came to be. So yeah, it was such an annoying distraction that I'm glad it subsided. Every once in a while, a tweet will sort of poke the bear, and I think, don't awaken these sleeping bozos. Let them sleep.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I got better things to do. Move along. All right, and we're gonna move along. So. Who do I start with? Can I start with Steve since he's fresh meat, and then we'll get back to you? Fresh meat, and
I'm a vegetarian, so
and I love how we started here with
a lie.
Because I will say,
into all the story.
The reason I went in to dig it up is only because you said the name Jim Cuddy, and I've had Mike Boguski on the program, who's the keyboardist for Blue Rodeo.
We love him.
And I went on the record with Mike, whose brother was in my class at Michael Power High School, Mark Boguski. So there's your small world story, because I think I got a couple years on Mike, but his brother was my age. But I have actually always wondered aloud, because I produce Humble and Fred, and Jim Cuddy's done that show a couple of times, and I've always wondered aloud, why can't I get Mr. Jim Cuddy to make his Toronto Mike debut? You think you can make it happen now?
I'm fairly confident I can.
Let's do it. Since that'll make it up, and then you'll be back in my good books.
I did not know I was in your bad books. But now that I know that, the lies will just be piled one on top of another, I suppose.
Let me see. Maybe you walk us through it. I do have some notes on your career, but
sure.
And I'm also curious, like, what are you guys? Sometimes people call you like, what is the term we call you guys? AR reps, or like what would you how would you define your role for the music companies, the labels?
Let's just call them promo reps, because I just realized that there's going to be people listening that if I say what I was actually going to say, I would be maligned.
No one's listening, Steve. Nobody's listening. No. This is like us three people having a private chat.
Yeah, promo reps. We both did publicity as well, so either way.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean,
but A&R is a whole different department.
So what is it? Because you watch like TV shows like Vinyl or whatever. Like I'm just why did I pick on Vinyl?
So so on TV, seriously, on TV shows like Vinyl, what you end up with are people whose jobs are basically A&R. They're hanging out with the artists and stuff like that.
Right.
The reality is, though, we're the people that hang out with the artists. The A&R people do schmooze with the artists a lot, but with regards to artists going to interviews on television, on radio, on podcasts, it's usually guys like us who don't drink. And no, it's usually guys like us that are taking them to the interviews, and that's when that's why we ended up with these stories that we end up with.
Yeah. A&R stands for Artist and Repertoire, and they're the ones who sign the bands.
I always wondered what the R was. This is
repertoire.
Yes, I should have Googled it. Okay, keep going.
That's good. And they're the ones who sign the band, so they're there at the earliest parts, but once they've been signed, they get handed over to marketing and then promotion and publicity, and that's our bailiwick at that point.
And if I can just say, since we're here and we're talking and there seems to be no time limit, Artist and Repertoire is actually an old term, because it used to be that these people worked with the artist and helped the artist find repertoire to perform. These days, that doesn't happen quite as much because the artists are coming in with their own repertoire.
So am I right? Like if you have an artist in town and let's say they've got, I don't know, they're going to be on breakfast television and then they're going to be on CBC and then on Q107. I don't know. There's a list of like an itinerary. Are you basically responsible for getting them from A to B to C?
Well, even before that is setting up the schedule so that we set up the Canada AM, the CFTRs, or whatever back in the day, the different places. And then in most cases, we would take them as well. There might be a department, so somebody else might be taking them too, but we would oversee that. And we were both overseeing the national side of things, so we would be doing it across the country where we have people in different cities who do that function for us.
Okay, so Sharon Taylor, who's also an FOTM, is watching live at the Pirate Stream, live.torontomike.com. The Pirate Stream exists so that not you necessarily, but the radio labels can't really knock me if I did play a little Motley Crue right now. So Sharon Taylor is saying that you guys are essentially babysitters.
Correct.
That's part of it. Sure. Absolutely.
Okay, shout out to that. And because I'm going to forget to ask this, I'm going to do this right now. Sharon also says she loves you guys. Can you tell me, Steve Waxman, before we find out more about your career and then get some stories, can you tell me your Brian Wilson singing story? Because Sharon says you have a Brian Wilson singing story.
Sure. Okay. I will tell you this story. We'll start this. And please, the fact that I started this whole thing with a lie should not color everything else I'm going to say.
I've already forgiven you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And we should say that we love Sharon Taylor too.
Oh, we do.
We
love Sharon.
So.
No, we do love Sharon Taylor very, very much. As a matter of fact,
there's my.
there we go.
That's from Evelyn Macco though, but there's
Very
the old
good.
680 CFTR.
I traveled years and years ago before Sharon worked at CFTR, and this is the way she and I became friends. I actually traveled to visit her at CHAB in Moose Jaw.
Oh my, you were the one.
I was the one.
Moose Jaw. Wow.
Yeah, when they had all of their music on, she showed me and I hope this isn't a lie. I hope this is the truth. their giant 8-track computer player thing. I believe, from what I can recall, it was this huge thing that had all these 8 tracks in it, and it would just move around in some sort of automated.
Yeah, they were
way.
automated, so they wouldn't be 8 tracks, but they'd be cartridges.
Okay.
And they were, it'd be automated so that way they didn't have to hire announcers. So
There you
they'd
go.
probably have a morning show, and that was about it.
Okay, come on. I'm telling the Brian Wilson story.
And go right ahead.
Thank you very much. So Brian Wilson had come to Toronto on the Smile tour, and I had worked with him a couple years earlier. I had Much Music in LA, and we went to Brian Wilson's house, and that's a whole other story that perhaps we'll get to if we have time.
We'll make time for that.
Okay. Anyway, it was prior to the show. Peter Mansbridge. I had set up an interview with Peter Mansbridge for the National that was going to be shot on the second floor of Massey Hall in the chairs.
Wow.
So take him up there. He does the interview with Peter Mansbridge, and at the end of the interview, he says, "It was nice to meet you. What was your name again?" And Peter said, "Peter." He goes, "Thank you, Peter." Anyway, Brian goes down to the stage to do the sound check with the band. Apparently, earlier that day, he had written a new song in his hotel room, and I watched as he taught the band how to play this new song, and it was really, really incredible. So what he would do, he sat down at the piano, and he performed the song at the piano at center stage on Massey, and the band all gathered around him and watched what he played. And then they all went back to their instruments, and they started to run through it again, and he was calling out the chords. The third time, he got up from the piano, and he started to walk from one instrument to another, kind of directing them, saying, "Okay, now I want you to play this part, and I want you to play that part." And you watched him, basically direct the creation of this song. It was really remarkable. So they must have played it 4 or 5 times, and then the sound check was over. I followed him down to the dressing room because I needed to get some posters signed. When we get into the dressing room, he had a little keyboard in the dressing room, and he sat down at the keyboard, and he was like, "Do you sing?" And I'm like, no, I don't sing. He goes, "No, sure, everybody can sing. Can you sing?" And I'm like, "No, I really can't sing." He goes, "Look, here are the lyrics to the song. I'd really like to hear what the song sounds like without me singing it. Can you sing it?" And I'm like,
wow.
I don't know. He goes, "Well, just give it a try." And he handed me the lyrics, and I had heard it enough times that the melody was stuck in my head because it's a Brian Wilson song, so it was like it was pretty sticky.
Right.
So he starts playing the song, and I start singing, and we get all the way through the song, and I've sung the whole song, and he stops, and it's quiet for a moment, and he turns to me and he goes, "Well, you could be in the back of a choir."
Wow. The musical genius that is Brian Wilson was sort of directing you in your singing debut there. That's wild. That's wild. And at Massey Hall, no doubt.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, my singing debut at Massey Hall. Trust me, I have sung at other places.
But from the seats watching the artist, there we are.
Oh, no, from many a stage, my young friend, from many a stage. My first public performance was actually my mic technique really got thrown there for a second. My first public performance was actually in the round at the Ontario Place Forum. With my grade 7 choir.
Oh.
And we were performing a song that I can't recall right now, but at one point, the girls in the choir had to drop their handkerchiefs, and then the boys would have to reach down and pick up the handkerchiefs. Well, it was a little bit breezy that day. So at rehearsal, the handkerchiefs kind of flew off. So what we ended up doing, because this is really clever, we tied a little stone into each of the handkerchiefs. And so when we got to that part of the song and the girls all dropped their handkerchiefs, all you heard around the forum was...
Very clever. Grade 7, that's a heck of a debut, but that's no Massey Hall. Although my first ever concert I attended was at the Ontario Place Forum, Chalk Circle.
Oh,
hey, you know what? I'm actually golf buddies with Chris Tate.
Okay.
On the mic.
On the mic, yeah. Don't mansplain my mic technique over here. You two, though, and your careers, it seems like you guys each had each other's jobs at a couple of labels, right? Like, is it Attic and Warner where you each kind of had each other's jobs?
Well, sort of. So I was working with RCA first, and then I went to Warner's, went to MCA, got let go from MCA, and was looking for a job. Just at that time, Steve was at Attic and got the job at Warner's in publicity.
Right.
So the Attic job was available. So in fact, I took Steve's job at that point. So we never actually worked together.
No, but you had...
We've been great friends all the way along, and we're promo buddies and doing our thing on the streets and going from there. But yeah, never really worked together, but did in fact piggyback each other, as it were.
So what do you think about, like, again, we haven't even discussed the structure for the show, but what do you think about like dueling banjo style, like going one at a time and sharing a story? Like, and I thought maybe with you, Kevin, because in case there are listeners and who haven't heard your first appearance yet, like maybe even like open up by sharing that Nirvana story real quick, because when you moved to MCA, you're director of promotions, and you're part of that, Nirvana push. And I know a lot of the listenership here, a lot of the Gen Xers listening would love to hear a Nirvana story.
So the album came out and arrived in our offices, and we listened to it, and we knew it was going to be a tough sell because there was really no radio station that was supporting that kind of music at that time. It was edgy. It was not labeled grunge.
No
yet,
pun intended with edgy.
Exactly. That probably was our only chance. But we were. It was so much the Rat and the Quiet Riots and that what I call kind of cartoon rock that was all over rock radio at the time. So
hair metal.
Yeah,
okay.
Hair metal for sure. And so we didn't know what to do with it, but we knew that there was a magic song on there called Smells Like Teen Spirit, and it was really strong. And so we just sat in our product planning meeting and talked about what we were going to do. And I have a little bit of a background for being wacky as far as promotions go, and we'll talk with Sharon Taylor about that a little bit later. But I thought, okay, I've got an idea, you guys. If there's any station that's going to support it, it'll be CHOM in Montreal, CHOM. They were a little bit more adventurous than Q107 or CFOX in Vancouver or City FM in Winnipeg. So I said, I think I can get it on there, if nothing else, as a feature. They said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I've got this idea. Let me throw it at you. The front cover of the album has got a baby on the front, so why don't I use that as the theme, and why don't I dress up like a baby? Why don't I go into Montreal and dress like a baby and sit on a blanket in front of the radio station from 6 in the morning until 10, so that I'll hit everybody who's working at the station at that time, whether they start early or a little bit later, and I'll play the song nonstop. And so here's this adult guy wearing a bib and a large diaper and fuzzy slippers and whatever, and I had a sign that said, "This baby needs a home on CHOM, smells like Teen Spirit." So all was good, and I had cassette singles, which is long.
Or as we call them, cassingles.
There we go, exactly.
Right.
And I had hundreds of them, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So I brought them with me to hand out to people as well. So the boss at MCA said, "Listen, if you're game to do it, go ahead." Well, it was December, so that wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done, but it was certainly a fun thing. So I flew into Montreal with all of the things that I picked up at costume stores, or that my grandmother's knitted blanket or whatever it happened to be, and checked into the hotel and asked them for a wake up call at 5:00. Well, as it turned out, I didn't get the wake up call. So here I am. I wake up naturally at about 5:30, pull on all the things, put my diaper on, put on my bib and my soother, and went down to the front desk. And here I am in very, very poor French, trying to give them hell for not giving me a wake up call. And oui, Monsieur Shea, whatever, and they're trying to stifle a laugh. Anyway, I took a taxi over to the radio station, put my blanket down, my sign out. I put the big boom box there and started to play it on a loop over and over and over again. And something really fortuitous happened. First of all, people coming by and couldn't believe there was a man dressed like a baby in front of the radio station. But Dawson College is just around the corner from CHOM. And so students going to school were stopping, and they were loving the track. And, of course, I'd give them a single, and off we go. And Well, they started to congregate, and more of them came, and they're telling their friends, you got to come over here and see what's happening in front of the radio station. And next thing you know, Green Avenue, which is where Shome was located, was blocked. So what was happening is that the radio stations all did traffic reports at that point, and they're saying there's something happening on Green Avenue in Westmount, and we don't know what it is. And well, then the TV stations came over to see what it was, and they see that there's a man dressed like a baby playing some wacky music, at least in their eyes anyway. And then Music Plus, which was the equivalent of Much Music at the time, they came by to do a story, and so it went on and on like that, and the whole street was blocked, and traffic was just snarled in downtown Montreal. So here I am continuing to play it. You have to remember it's December. I'm wearing a diaper. My girlfriend at the time told me, you know what, you should really probably wear some pantyhose because at least that'll warm you up a little bit. But they don't, Mike. Not at all. But anyway.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. And a little tiny T-shirt and my all my things. Anyway, the program director came out and said, okay, here's the deal. A guy named Ian McLean. He said, listen, Kevin, if you believe in the song that much, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll put it on a make it or break it thing that we do in the evenings. If it doesn't work, you can never talk to me about this act ever again.
Right.
Got it? But if it works for us, we'll put it into a light nighttime rotation and we'll see where it goes from there. Well, they put it on, it blew up, 98% of the people, and when they added it to their playlist, then Q107, then City, then CFox, all the big rock stations added it. So I wasn't the sole reason. I mean, it was breaking in the U.S. at the same time, but I think back very fondly, and I did get pneumonia.
Is that right?
Yeah. And then one of the books that came out, quote about Nirvana, quoted Kurt Cobain talking about it took a weasel to a record weasel to
that's you.
To get our song played, but at least we got it played. So I got a backhanded compliment from Kurt Cobain before we lost him.
Okay, so I love that story because if people don't know, never mind. I think by Christmas or something had passed Michael Jackson's. What was it? Michael Jackson's History, whatever the Michael Jackson album was out at the time. It was like #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 album chart or whatever for at least 1 week. Anyway, but yeah, that's the rest is history. But here, I've decided now I'm going to lead you guys into a story before you guys go potpourri on me. But by stuff that was just like coincidentally just in my studio here. So here is. The Road Apples by the Tragically Hip. And then I have another one for you afterwards, Steve, that's you're going to speak to. But what can you tell me about helping Road Apples get to #1?
Well, here we go again. Sorry to monopolize, Steve.
No. Steve's next with one of my favorite 12-inch singles of all time.
Perfect. So I joined MCA during the Up to Here album. The tail end of the Up to Here album was Blow It High Do, et cetera, et cetera. I'd actually had been with RCA Records when they were signed, when the Tragically Hip was signed to RCA. So it was there at the very, very beginning when they put out the EP that had Highway Girl and different tracks like that on it. So I had some background with them, and I certainly knew the manager of the band, Jake Gold, quite well. In fact, he was one of the reasons that I was working at MCA. He had put my name forward and recommended me. Anyway, it was time for the next album to come out. So Jake and his partner, Alan Gregg, brought us to a studio. I can't remember the name of the studio, but for a listening session with the head office at MCA and the local promo reps. And he played what would become Road Apples for us, and we were mesmerized. And they were already my favorite band at that point, but just ready to go, could hardly wait, and off we went. So the album came out, and it went to #1 almost right away. In fact, it went #1 that week of its release, and it was a platinum record within a month of release at that point. So at that time, people like Steve and I would give awards to people who contributed a great deal to the promotion of the album, the success of the album. And quite often it would be what we call a gold record or a platinum record or double platinum or whatever it happened to be. But I thought I would try something a little bit different. So I started to think about it, Road Apples being a term that I knew through hockey circles as being horse manure. People would play hockey with road apples in the frozen winters of Canada. And so I thought, okay, here, let me think here. I found an ad somewhere that said, "We will acrylicize anything." Well, I don't think they were expecting that I would be acrylicizing horse manure. So I called a farmer in Caledon, and he said, "Well, yeah, I can get you some horse manure." He packed it in a styrofoam container. We put it on a train and sent it to this gentleman in Quebec, who acrylicized it into 3-inch acrylic blocks. Sent the blocks back. We put walnut bases there and put the plaque on it and road apples. I'm gonna have to paraphrase it. Road apples, the Tragically Hip, #1 in Canada. Thanks for helping us get this hit. And I put the this and hit close together so it looked like another word.
It's creative. Steve, this guy's creative.
Oh, he is. He's my hero.
He's my hero. Come on.
Okay, well,
thanks for helping us get this hit together. And we sent it off to different people, the buyers, the radio stations, some journalists, et cetera, et cetera. One lady refused to put it on her desk. "I'm not putting a piece of on my desk," and so she refused to take it. So we had an actual plaque made up for her, but everybody else got their road apple acrylic plaque, and the band to this day talks about it. Gord Downey's brother Mike, I was in a conversation with him about something else, but he told me how proud he was when Gord gave him the acrylicized road apple back in the day.
Wow. Okay, and more stories from you, Kevin, of course. Again, I'm not even going to watch the clock. You guys just tell me when you're exhausted. But Steve, let me hear your voice again. So what am I holding in my hand? What am I holding? You tell the audience.
Let your backbone slide.
Hey. And Maestro's been on a few times, and the first time he visited, he signed this. But I bought this in '89, so
Beautiful.
This was the real
Thank
deal. You're welcome. No, I loved it, and I was a big Maestro. Well, still am. But you were at Attic Records when this came out, right?
Steve is the reason.
I'm actually kind of the reason.
Well, listen. So let me shut up and listen. I want to hear everything you can share with me about working at Attic and your take full credit, please. I want to hear about Maestro Fresh Wes.
Okay, the story actually starts a couple years earlier. Actually, yeah, no, the story does start a couple years earlier. God, this is going to be long-winded. So, buckle up. Come to the rodeo. Here we go.
You don't mind if I go for a quick bike ride, and I'll just listen to this later.
Okay, that's actually a good idea, especially with the way I tell stories. And then she said, "No, okay." So it's actually does start a few years earlier. Daniel Coderone was a guy that ran one of the cheer pool. And the cheer pool was where all of the DJs would get together and they would hear new music, and then they would take, the record labels would bring them 12 inches. They would take them out to the clubs and hopefully promote them and whatnot. So Daniel, I don't remember exactly what was happening. Daniel was running some sort of program where new street artists could perform at the Bamboo. And I got invited to come out one night. I think we all got invited, but only me and Dave Tollington from Warner Music actually showed up this one particular night. I was at Attic Records at the time, and this hip hop act called Vision performed, and I thought that they were fantastic. Now, keep in mind, we haven't gone back in my history yet, but I actually went to NYU, and then when I graduated, I'm from Toronto, but I went to NYU. When I graduated, I stayed in New York and worked in the music industry in New York for a bit.
Coin management.
Management.
Almost said it properly.
You almost did. So because I was living in New York in the early 80s, I really became fascinated with hip hop music, and I loved the rhythms and whatnot. No street cred here. It's just
you were there.
I was there. Anyway, so Vision performed, and they were terrific. And I turned to Dave Tollington and I said, "You should sign these guys. They're fantastic." And Dave's like, "Well, why don't you sign these guys if you think they're so great?" And I'm like, "Whatever." So I walk up to the stage and I say to one of the guys, "I'm Steve Waxman from Attic Records. You guys were fantastic. Here's my card. Please call me. I would love to talk to you." And they never called.
Wow.
Not long after that, if you remember the band Haywire.
Yeah.
Okie dokie.
In fact, on the live stream, Sharon was hoping Haywire was in this story, and of course she's right. So let's hear it. Yeah, of course Haywire. Are you kidding me?
So Haywire, we had a lot of success at Attic Records with their first record. Their first record was gold, and they were in the studio, and they were beginning to record the second record. And for those of us that are old enough, you'll remember that the first single on the second record was a song called Dance Desire.
Of course, big hit on CFTR.
There you go. When the band was in the studio recording, I was going to visit them, but the night before I went to visit them, I went to see the Prince movie, Under a Cherry Moon.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah.
And because I was a huge Prince fan. In the 80s, once I was turned on to Prince music, which was with the album Dirty Mind, literally, there was not a day in the 1980s that I didn't listen to Prince at some point during the day. That was 7 days a week for 10 years.
Wow.
Anyway, I went to see Under the Cherry Moon, and the next day I went over to Metalworks Studios to visit with the guys and have lunch with them. And when I was driving over there, I had a vision for a video for Dance Desire. And if you remember the movie at all...
See, I don't have any memories. I don't think I saw this movie.
There's the movie's in black and white. There's a scene in the movie where Prince and his band are performing in the backyard of a mansion.
Okay.
So I had this vision of recreating that entire scene, but with Haywire performing Dance Desire. And the idea to start the video would be, there's a song playing, probably Bad Bad Boy or something like that. And a butler's hand would come and take the arm of the record player and lift it up. And then Paul McCausland, the singer, would yell from the stage, "Drop the needle!" Woo! And the needle would go back, and then Dance Desire would start. So I told them this idea. They went back into the studio that afternoon, and Paul laid down at the beginning of the song, "Drop the needle."
Right.
Okay. So now let's move ahead a couple of years. I'm at a DJ pool meeting, and Wes and his manager, Farley Flex, come to the meeting to thank all of the DJs for helping Let Your Backbone Slide become a hit. And we want to play you the next single that we're going to drop. And the single was Drop the Needle. And when I heard it, my jaw dropped. And I went in, and remember, and this was a time when people were getting sued for samples.
Right, like the Paul's Boutique era.
That's actually, I think it's slightly before Paul's Boutique.
Okay,
even,
okay.
Maybe. Anyway, I don't remember exactly the years. But anyway, I went into the office. So that was Saturday. On the Monday, I went into the office and I told Al Mayer, the president of Attic, that this is what happened. There's this guy, Maestro Fresh West, who's got this single called, Let Your Backbone Slide, and their next single is Drop the Needle, and they're sampling Haywire.
Right. That's wild.
He contacted LMR Records, which was the record label in New York.
Right, because of Stevie B.
Stevie B.
Right.
And made a deal instead that we would put out the Maestro Fresh West record in Canada.
This is amazing. I love it.
And Al said to me, I remember when we were talking about this, and he was telling me, like, this is a possibility of what we're going to do. Do you think that this song, Let Your Backbone Slide, can be a hit? And I said to him, Al, it already is a hit. Right. We just need to put it out.
Wow. And that, I think that was the first Canadian hip hop hit, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was everywhere. And I want to shout out a good FOTM who's also been like amazing through the past several years. But I want to shout out Joel Goldberg.
Oh, yeah.
And Joel, who I was just for the Doors Open Toronto, I was at Zoomer because FOTM Ed Conroy, one of only 2 FOTMs in the FOTM Hall of Fame, by the way. they trying to do the Speaker's Corner thing. I can't remember what they're calling it, but they didn't call it Speaker's Corner. Maybe Rogers owns that. But they anyway, I was there and Joel was there, and every time Joel comes on, we get reminded that Joel Goldberg not only co-created Electric Circus, but directed those videos, Let Your Backbone Slide and Drop the Needle.
And the Dream Warriors and Kish, and on and on and on it goes. Mishi Me.
And I always, again, broken record for the regular listeners, but shout out to FOTM Dwight Drummond, who's got the cameos in those first 2 Maestro videos as well. He's in Let Your Backbone Slide and he's in Drop the Needle.
Drop the Needle!
As well. And shout out to Haywire. I've not yet been on the show. But okay, love it. That's great. See, look, Steve, out of the box. I mean, those stories from Kevin are fantastic, but there we go with the Drop the Needle attic connection. Amazing. Awesome stuff.
There you have it.
So now that I saw those records in the corner of my eye and said, "Oh, you guys have great stories about both of these things." So now we'll go back to Kevin. Kevin, is there a story that you think you're an FOTM? You know what makes a great story on this program. Just spit it into that microphone.
Oh, buddy! Whoa!
Stop the music! Stop the rock and
Drop
roll!
the needle.
I don't. Okay, hang on a second. It's going to be a short story that you're going to tell.
Okay.
Which one?
Oh yeah. You guys can guide each other along. Perfect.
The time. Okay, I want you to do the punchline. The time that all of the reps got together at my apartment prior to a meeting because we were going to perform for the DJs. Oh, come on, Kev.
Well, I remember we all did a dance routine, and I couldn't remember the routine.
See, if that build up.
But what happened at the end of the routine?
I did the split.
Ah!
Oh, there we are. That's right. I did. I forgot about that. Here we are. Jeez.
You see, Kevin Shea is the only human being that I know that can actually do the splits for real.
I don't know if I can still do them. Anyway, lots of fun back.
Let's just move these cameras around.
Goaltender? Were you a goaltender?
Just in ball hockey only.
Just ball hockey. Those goaltenders
ball
seem to be good at, yeah. They have that flexible groin. Okay. So maybe I got to, Steve, because I know Kevin's leading in stories, so we have to get you to catch up. And you've never been on before, but you played in a band with Thurston Moore?
I did. I played in a band called Even Worse, where I was kind of a hardcore punk band. And it actually, ironically, this is coincidentally.
Yeah.
Earlier today, I was doing an interview with my college roommate for my podcast, and Tim Summer, and he actually was the bass player in Even Worse.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Shout out your podcast before we get too deep here.
I will. My podcast is called The Creationists, and it's a podcast about people who create things.
It's a great podcast. Really good podcast.
Have you had, has Kevin Shea been on?
As a matter of fact, Kevin Shea has been on. He was on in the first season, as was Jim Cuddy. He was our first guest.
When my oldest was a Timbit hockey player, see, we got to bring some hockey in for Kevin here, but when my oldest was a Timbit, he got to play during the intermission at the Air Canada Centre.
Right.
So the Swansea hockey Timbits got to do it one. And that means the parents, I got to go, get them to help get their skates on. So I'm down there waiting by the gate or whatever, Air Canada Centre. And who do you think's standing there to do to sing "O Canada" that particular game? It's Jim Cuddy. So there you go. I was close enough.
Okay.
So we've all worked with Jim Cuddy at some point. Then
that's all I have. See, Steve, that's all I got. That's my really? Jim Cuddy story.
And it couldn't have been. Oh, hi, Jim. I'm Toronto Mike. How about doing an interview with me? Oh, you'll have to call Steve Waxman to set that up.
He says it's up to Waxman. You know that. So
okay, hang on a second. I want to keep going with Even Worse for a second.
Yeah, of course.
Since you brought it up, and
I did bring it up.
There's no other reason really. I have two Even Worse stories.
Well, that's amazing that
I want to share.
You and Thurston Moore are in a band. Like that's something that's going to blow some minds.
So I did. Well, okay. So I guess there's three stories.
Okay.
First of all, so. Even Worse was already a punk band on the New York hardcore scene. And they had 3 or 4 different lineups. One day, my roommate Tim came back to the room with a bass. And he wasn't in the band. He came back with a bass, and he said, Jack Rabid, the drummer and the leader of Even Worse, Jack wants me to be in Even Worse. Can you teach me how to play the songs on the bass? So I taught him how to play the songs on the bass, and then after I taught him how to play the songs on the bass, he said, well, why don't you come along? They need a guitar player, and you already know the songs now. So I went along and went to the first rehearsal, and there was another guitar player there, a very tall, skinny guy named Thurston. So we're trying to figure out, okay, what songs should we play? And we played a couple of the Even Worse songs, but Thurston hadn't learned that many. He had only learned, I think, one or two. And then we were trying to think of something else to play, and we settled on Motorhead, Ace of Spades.
Sure.
So we play Ace of Spades, and the song at the end of the song, Thurston's guitar's out of tune. So I'm like, well, tune up your guitar, man. And he starts working on it, and he can't get the thing tuned up. So I walk over to his guitar, and I tune up his guitar, and then we play another song, and at the end of the song, his guitar's out of tune. So I'm like, dude, your song, let's clean this up here. And he's trying to tune up this guitar, and he doesn't tune up. So I go over, and I twist the knobs again, and we get his guitar in tune, and we play another song, and at the end of the song, his guitar's out of tune. Anyway, this was around the time he and Kim had just started Sonic Youth. Like, they had maybe played a couple of gigs, but he had been in a band called the Swans, and now he was starting Sonic Youth. And they were going to play at the Mud Club. So he said to us, hey, we're, Sonic Youth's playing at the Mud Club. You want to come out and see us play? So he says, sure. So we go out to the Mud Club, and band comes out on stage, and the very first thing he does is he takes a screwdriver, and he shoves it into the strings. And with his other hand, he's got a drumstick. And for the song, he's moving the screwdriver up and down the strings, and he's banging on the strings with the drumstick. Anyway, at the end of the set, we go into the dressing room, and he goes, so what you think? And I'm like, I think I know why you can't keep your fucking guitar in tune.
Love it.
So that was, okay, so that's the first story.
Yeah.
The second story is Even Worse played at the Mud Club not long after that. And Thurston and I, at one point, were playing, I don't know, a song like Last Night's Blimpie or something like that. And we were at the front of the stage, and we were doing kiss moves together. And so our guitar necks were parallel, and we're going up and down and up and down. His guitar, the guitar stock, the tuning pegs go into the head of a skinhead, splits the skin, and blood starts pouring down the guy's face, and he's got the biggest shit-eating grin on his face. Jeez. So that's two. And then the third story is, and this is a story I actually recently shared on the Book of Faces, because I had just watched Pistol, the Sex Pistols thing on Disney Plus. So Even Worse was playing at a place called Irving Plaza in New York, and we were opening for a band called Kraut. And Kraut were friends of ours, really great, sort of New York-styled, or sort of a Clash-styled New York band, so a little bit heavier than the Clash. But anyway, regardless. But Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols had been working with Kraut, helping them produce a demo, and was playing with them that night. Now, I was a huge Sex Pistols fan, and earlier in the afternoon at soundcheck, I went up to him, and we started, chatting in general. And I said to him, one thing that I always was curious about is, like, you guys always talked about how poor you were, how you had no money and anything. But every time I saw a picture of you, you had the best guitars, the best amps, and the best leathers. And he looks at me and goes, well, stole all those, didn't we? And I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway, later that night, we had played our set, and then we're standing on the balcony, and Steve Jones is playing along, and he breaks a string on his guitar. And at the end of the song, he leans into the mic and he goes, "Is Steve from Even Worse here? I need to borrow your guitar." Needless to say, I did not move. Thank you.
No, it's a trifecta. Beautiful.
Thank you. We're on to Kevin Shea now.
Okay, Kevin, actually, I just had in the studio here, and maybe you heard this episode, a couple months ago, Martha and the Muffins were here. Mm-hmm. You were at RCA, right? Was it RCA?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe share, if you don't mind, going back, any stories about Martha and the Muffins. We did talk about, like, why would Martha and the Muffins become M&M, and it sounds like Mark just got tired of being a muffin and didn't want to be a muffin anymore.
So when I joined, Jerry Young had a label called Current Records, and they were distributed by RCA. So they came under our domestic roster, Parachute Club, M&M, M+M.
Right.
I guess they were Martha and the Muffins.
It was the same band, but just new
Yeah.
name, and then they eventually went back to the old name. But
So, I mean, it's not a great story by any means, but they put out a track called...
Make it great.
I'll try. I'll have to
way to
embellish
lower
them.
our expectations,
Jeez,
Kev.
that's for sure.
Heaven forbid it'd be a great story.
Had a track called Black Stations, White Stations. And
84.
And,
They name checked the year in that song, so you always know what year it came out.
Great track. But anyway, I had to take them to Kitchener for a TV interview, and so it's an hour drive, an hour and a half.
Is that CKCO?
Exactly, yes.
What else
exactly.
is there, right?
There we are. But I just realized how far out of their realm I was, because I asked a traditional record rep question. So, what are you listening to these days? And they name checked all kinds of bands that I had never heard of before. And they asked me, and I said, "Oh, I'm really into Level 42 right now."
Right.
And they gave me a look like, "What the hell? Who are we working with here?" But I had a great deal of respect for them, and we had a lot of fun with them, and did very, very well with Black Stations, White Stations, a couple of other tracks as well, and off we went. So they were great.
But you didn't have a moment where you whispered in Martha's ear maybe and said, maybe you should go with the name that got you famous with Echo Beach. Like, why are you rebranding?
Well, we did talk about that, but I think
it never made sense to me as a listener.
I think it was a U.S. decision. I think the U.S. record company thought, okay, Martha and the Muffins, not sure. M+M gives us a little bit wider range.
Because Echo Beach wasn't a U.S. hit. That's right. Am I right? Echo
they
Beach
were on
was...
Polygram at the time.
Okay.
And Martha and the Muffins was I think it was an international hit.
Definitely a hit, like in the U.K.
Yeah, my wife is from Birmingham, and she knows the song. Doesn't like it.
I just wonder if it's a U.S. Oh no. They have an Echo Beach now at Ontario Place, and I know they tried to get some money for that, because I don't think Martha and the Muffins were compensated for the fact that they named this beach Echo Beach. As if they would have named it Echo Beach without that big, Toronto single.
No, for sure. But I'm sure it was New York. I think it was RCA New York that insisted on a name change to M+M. And
M+M.
Yeah, we had to be so specific. It's not M&M. It was M+M. We don't want to get
right,
sued by
Mars.
the candy company either. So there we are. So
you know who would have done a really great cover of Black Stations, White Stations?
Even worse?
No. UB40.
Oh, actually, they would have.
They would have.
They would have.
I should have been an A&R guy.
So, Kevin, since that was your bad story, what could you share with us about being there with Whitney Houston blowing up? Like, there must be a story about Whitney Houston, no?
Well, so...
And if there's no story, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, no, there's a story for sure.
Okay.
We were at a conference at RCA back in whatever year it was, 1983, 84, something like that. And Clive Davis, who was the owner of Arista Records.
Somehow still alive, even though I did the math. He's 183 years old now. So.
He's up there for sure. But he was bringing a new act he wanted to introduce to RCA Records Canada. And here's this shy, sweet little thing who came up, and she wasn't an imposing figure by any means, but she was there, and we knew her a little bit already because a track had been released that she had duetted with Jermaine Jackson on. And CKFM here in Toronto, the old Mix 99, previous to Mix 99.9 and Virgin, had played the track to some degree. So there was a little bit of recognition factor there, but not very much.
Okay.
But she was there, and she came over and very, very shyly shook a couple of people's hands, including mine. I was doing local promotion, so they knew that I would be dealing with Chum and CFTR and stations like that. And we left it at that, and we were told that a new album was coming. So we got the cassette album, version of the album, and got it up. And
cassette album.
Yeah, there we go. And we were told, listen, Kevin, can you set up a showcase for her? I said, sure. So I talked to, what was the name of the...
Blue Note?
The Blue Note, thank you. Yes, exactly, on Pears Avenue. And they said, yes, we could have the forum there from 4 till 8 or something like that. And she was going to showcase. She was going to sing 4 tracks to track, and four songs to track, rather. And so we tried to get people to come out, and nobody wanted to come. Nobody wanted to come. So I called all of these record pool DJs that we talked about earlier from the Cheer record pool and everybody else, just to try and pack the place with people so that it wasn't embarrassing to me, to the record label, to Whitney either. anyway,
is there free beer at these things?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's
absolutely.
not enough to get all these guys out there.
Not at that time, and not with a basically unknown artist, and nobody was too impressed at that point. Well, so we did pack the place with people, but there were some people that were quite consequential and others that were lesser so. So anyway, she got up and boy, she wailed. She was so good. Even though she's singing the track, she sang 4 tracks and blew us away. We had no idea. Then everybody clamored for the cassettes and whatever to try and get her to sign, and we took her to every table to shake hands, and she was very uncomfortable doing that. But we took her to every single table, met everybody. She signed the cassette for them all. And then we put out a song called You Give Good Love to Me, which wouldn't have been our first choice, but the U.S. was going with it, so we went with it, and it went to #1 and followed up with How Will I Know and all the other tracks that she had. And
right.
Next time she came up, we had a room at the, what's the name of the hotel?
Sutton Place?
Sutton Place Hotel, Steve.
You're a good team.
He's got all the great information at the Sutton Place, and we had all of the awards for her. Gold singles, platinum singles, double platinum singles, gold albums, et cetera, et cetera.
It was a monster.
Put them behind the big curtain, and Whitney walked in, and she just looked spectacular. She had certainly found her place at that time, and had a number of hits. And she walked in, and all the TV stations and the radio stations and everybody, the photographers were there, and we pulled the curtain back, and there had to have been 50, 60 different awards that she was receiving from Canada at that point, and that was when we really, well, she had already established herself as a superstar.
No, that debut, self-titled, right? That was just a monster.
And just a lovely, lovely lady, surprisingly shy. As time went on, she certainly was groomed and went forward, and it was very sad how she found her demise. But she was wonderful to deal with, and just to think that it was all we could do to get anybody to come out to her opening at that point, and went on to be this one of the great sensations.
Maybe one of the more shocking declines, really, when you think of the Whitney Houston we were introduced to in like 87 or whatever, 88, and then what happened with Whitney? It's shocking.
And, you hate to pin it on anybody, but her relationship with Bobby Brown certainly didn't help at all either. But
Bobby Brown was an R&B singer back in the late 80s and mid 90s. We're not talking about Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things right now.
11. And I feel like maybe like the commissioner of the National League, was there a Bobby Brown like in baseball?
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
I think lots of Bobby Browns out there. And then what's the name of? She died too. Whitney's daughter died in
Bobby Brown.
Bobby
Brown with an I, I think. Okay, this is tragic. There
we are.
Tragic. Okay, so great story. Now back to Steve, because I'm wondering, when you were at Warner, if you have any Alanis Morissette stories, because I just watched the documentary about Alanis.
Can I lead into it?
Go right ahead.
No, you may not. Yes, of course you can.
So Alanis was signed to MCA Records originally, and we had her for a couple of dance albums, dance pop albums.
I mean, never too hot, never too cold.
There we
take
are,
your best
exactly.
shot, too hot to hold.
So I worked with Alanis a great deal, and it was mostly mall performances and anthems at the Ottawa Rough Riders or Toronto Blue Jays or whatever. But we did well, and she won a Juno for Most Promising Female Vocalist. I'd moved on. I'm now with Attic Records, and Steve said, it was just at the, and you'll pick it up in a second, Steve, but I've got this cassette here. I want to send it over to you. I want
or not.
to hear. I had, during that summer, I used to rollerblade every day, and there were a few of us who would go, and Alanis had moved to Toronto, and so she would come and rollerblade with us every once and again, and we would ask her from time to time, didn't want to be too prying, but what she was up to. And she said, I'm working on some new music with some new writers and stuff. And she did play one track to me, and it was pretty nondescript, but all was good. Time went on. Steve saw her at a conference and sent the cassette over and said, you're not going to believe Alanis. It's unbelievable. Oh, my God. And I listened to it, and You Ought to Know was the lead track. And he said, what do you think? I said, you're never going to get any radio play with it. But it's a good track, but you're not going to get any airplay with it.
I mean, no, it references going down on you in a theater. Yeah. This is just obscene, right, Kevin?
For sure. That's one of the reasons why I'm a promo guy. But I was proved very, very wrong on that one. Sorry, Steve. So you pick it up from there.
Swallow that jagged little pill, Steve. Let's go.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I'm gonna preface my story with Alanis is a tremendous human being.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. She's like everybody that knows her loves her because she is a fantastic human being.
Okay.
And super talented. Okay. I'm about to tell the story.
But whenever someone says, I'm going to preface this by saying she's a wonderful human being, now you're going to tell a story where she's going to sound like an animal, just a monster. Right?
No, that's not what's going to happen. What is going to happen though is Kevin telling the story that he just told of me enthusiastically sending him the cassette is true to a certain point, except for the enthusiasm.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay.
Oh, you sent it over with like, you won't believe what she's trying to do now. Like, this has no chance of success.
Okay, so you've already heard the story.
I want to know. I ought to know what this story is about.
Okay. Leading up to, the company saw her perform at a Warner Music Canada convention in Banff. Okay, just a month or so before You Ought to Know was released as a single. Okay.
Okay.
Is that preface it? What we used to do is for presentations of new product, we would put together presentation videos. And I, for Warner Brothers, was putting together a presentation video. And what I did was I used my parents, who my father, who's passed now, is Polish and my mom's Russian. So their English is a little off. And what I would do in this presentation video was I would play them a song, and then I would get their feelings on the songs.
Okay.
And, they don't like rock and roll music. And my dad was tone deaf, so I was like, pfft. Anyway, one of the songs was You Ought to Know, and I played it for them. And their response was, I don't know what she's singing about, but she has a lovely voice. Okay, that's fine. Anyway, I heard the record, and I'm like, okay, whatever.
Wait, you heard all of Jagged Little Pill?
I heard all of Jagged Little Pill.
And you were like, whatever.
And I'm like, well, she did Paula Abdul when she was at MCA, and now she's doing Courtney Love Light. That is what I was thinking.
Right.
And so Alanis shows up. Now, she knows me. She knows me from, because I had met her with Kevin.
Right.
So she knows who I am. She shows up at the airport, and we chat, but she's not sure if she's supposed to be a surprise. So it's a really uncomfortable conversation. And she's sitting beside me on the bus on the way to Banff, kind of like, I'm here, but I'm not here. Like, that's fine. That's fine. Whatever. So later that night, she and her band perform, and they were loud and dynamic, and they played the album like note for note. It was pure rock and roll.
Right.
But I walk over to Dave Tollington, who was the head of domestic marketing at Warner, and he's like, "This is really incredible." And I went, "Really? You think so?" I'm thinking like 15,000, and then I walk away.
Wow.
Her manager, Scott Welsh at the time, didn't hear me say that, but he heard from people that I had said that. And while I was her publicist for the remainder of her time at Warner, he never let me forget it. And he would always start each project with, "Hi, Steve, it's Scott. I own you."
Oh, jeez. Wow.
Yeah.
I can't remember. How did that album do, that Jagged Little Pill? Did it exceed your expectations of 15,000 units?
By, I think by 12 million.
Woo!
In Canada.
Yeah.
Let alone the rest of the world. I think that thing's got to be 27 million around the world.
Jeez.
I'm not sure. You'd be hard pressed to find a solo woman, a solo female performer that sold more units of an album than that. Actually,
I can't remember the stats, but yeah, she was at one point that album was the third biggest selling album of all time. Yeah. I don't know that it is anymore, but it was right up there.
Yeah, no, I mean, Whitney Houston would be the closest, wouldn't she?
Who knows?
And it probably isn't even that close. But maybe Shania Twain. I don't know. I was because there's but I still think Alanis wins that one. But amazing. I'm trying to think. Mark Breslin was over here. He's the Yuck Yucks guy.
Yes, he is.
He was talking about like Jim Carrey would play his clubs in the early 80s, and he felt Jim Carrey was not that good and wasn't going to make it. So, but this might even beat that.
If I can beat Mark Breslin, well, not physically, but I probably could because he's a smaller guy.
You could beat him, man.
Yeah, no. I used to hang out with him every once in a while. And
well, he has I was gonna say that's not that. I guess he's about 10 or something, but he has a kid. Like he's one of those guys. I think of him and Ralph Benmergui, the guys who have the kids when you're supposed to be a grandpa.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Maybe someone here's doing that. I don't want to. No judgment.
All of us
could have been me.
All of us Jews from the entertainment industry, we all know each other. We're all at each other's bar mitzvahs.
I'll sit this one out. I'll sit this one out. But I can tell you that I'm. What am I? I'm not quite 50 yet, but I've got a 6-year-old upstairs, and I always wonder how are they doing this? Like this is like a 70-year-old man running after the 6-year-old. Like that can't be easy. But good for Breslin and good for Benmergui. And maybe when you're Mark Breslin, you just hire like a nanny to do all the heavy lifting or something like that. I don't know.
Comedians have to do double duty on their evening performance.
That's right. Shout out to Ralph Benmergui. Okay, I want to give you something quick before we get to the next story, which is that you guys are playing. Well, Steve's playing with the measuring tape, and there's one for you as well, Kevin.
Thank you.
Courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home.
That's what I was
nice.
wondering. I was trying to read it. It's like
Ridley Funeral Home wants you to you never know when you have to measure something. You know
Very
what
good.
I mean?
Thank you.
Kevin, we're measuring you up.
Not ready yet.
For a casket, right? That's the go-to. Okay, so that's courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home.
Thank you, Ridley.
Pillars of this community since 1921. And in fact, Brad Jones at Ridley Funeral Home has a great podcast called Life's Undertaking, and I get to co-host that, so it's fun for me, and you guys should check it out. It's pretty good stuff.
Do you know Brad from when he was the music director at Chum?
He just came up, and I'm trying to think of where he came up.
It's not the same Brad. Oh, I wondered. What?
But
he's the one that called me Little Stevie from the beginning.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Who brought up? Maybe it was Amber Pay. Somebody in a very recent episode of Toronto Mike brought up that Brad Jones. Oh yes, it was Amber Pay. She said that's your Brad Jones. This is my Brad Jones. But yeah, and I did the 1050 Chum retrospective, and Brad came up in that one too. So
that was very good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I always, when you insiders listen, I always wonder.
And
if
the Q107 and the CFNY one as well. They were phenomenal.
Well, I knew that the CFNY one must have been good because Scott Turner himself only learned what the NY and CFNY was supposed to stand for from that episode, 1000.
I was surprised. I mean, I knew that, but we had always laughed and thought it was Canada F's New York, and that's what CFNY stood for. But yeah, I was surprised that he didn't know that. But David Marsden came through.
Marsden's the man. Shout out to David Marsden. Okay, so I gave you that, and just quickly, we talked about Canna Cabana off the top, but you guys are taking home a toque from Canna Cabana, so you might not enjoy the product, but... And by the way, don't say no. You never know. If I have edibles upstairs, and if you need to take the edge off, any anxiety or anything, having trouble sleeping, these edibles are a pretty smart idea. So Canna Cabana sent you the toque.
Thank you.
Do you guys? I know you're straight edge, but does that mean no lasagna? What's your lasagna policy?
I want.
Okay, it's in my freezer.
Seriously?
Yeah, you're gonna get a palm pasta lasagna. I am telling you the truth.
I was gonna joke with you at the beginning, and I'm not.
Why
joking
do you think
with
this box is here? Oh, just to see the product. I see. Oh yeah, no, you're gonna leave with a large meat lasagna from Palma Pasta.
Hello.
All yours, buddy, and Kevin, you too, buddy.
So I'm vegetarian, so if you don't mind,
but here's the thing. I just did this for James B. Do you guys think James B is famous?
Sure.
James, I got a story about James B.
Yeah.
Okay, hit me with the James B story, but remind me to come back to Palma Pasta.
No, do Palma Pasta first.
So James B, because I have meat lasagna in the freezer. James B also only has vegetarian. So I got him a vegetarian lasagna and biked it over. Like, Kevin, I'll get you the vegetarian lasagna.
You know what? I appreciate that very much, but maybe what I can do is I'll take it. I'll give half to Steve and Melanie. And I'll take half from my wife.
But he's getting a full one.
No, absolutely. But if
you're going to give him 1.5, he's going to be eating it for weeks.
My boys are pretty big.
Okay.
We'll figure it out ourselves. But I really appreciate Palma. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, but just so you know, I can. Palma Pasta makes a great vegetarian lasagna.
I'll have to check that out sometime.
Totally hook you up. And this T-shirt. I'm not wearing the shorts right now, but I do love the Doer shorts and the Doer pants. They're comfortable, they're rugged, they look great. And if you go to doer.ca, DUER.ca, or the new retail store on Queen Street, you can save 15% at Doer with the promo code Toronto Mike. So all one word. You can save 15%. It helps the show. And yeah, it looks great. It's rugged. You can wear it in the bike lane and then wear it in the boardroom. Much love to Doer, the world's most comfortable pants and shorts.
You should try and get some of your sponsors to work together, so maybe we could have Do or Die with Ridley and go from there.
See, creative.
There we go.
That's almost as good as the diaper idea. At Shom. You know, and FOTM is the morning show host at Shom right now. But you probably already know this, but Jay Michaels, Mad Dog.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is your morning show host at
Came
Shom.
from Toronto.
Of course you know these
good
things.
man.
Who am I trying to tell you? I know this guy. Actually, where do I go? So the Atlantis. We're in the middle of an Atlantis story. You said that wasn't going to sell, but that was just I guess we got the great Atlantis story. Okay, so I want to get back to. You mentioned Kiss earlier, but it's not your turn now. It's Kevin's turn. So Kevin, so you hold your fire. It's coming soon. But I could easily ask you for like a Weird Al or a Motley Crue. But is there a story? Maybe Steve, you would know. Is there a story we should extract right now from Kevin that maybe I don't know?
The Dolly Parton story?
Is there a Dolly Parton story?
No,
People
yeah.
love Dolly Parton. She might be the most universally beloved musician we have.
She's a lovely, lovely lady. So Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton were performing together. They were doing the Islands in the Stream tour. I was with RCA at the time, and we had a Christmas album from the two of them, plus we had individual albums from both artists, Kenny and from Dolly. So they were coming through, and that would have been my responsibility to take care of them, so I was quite excited. I had broken my wrist playing hockey just before that, so I had a cast on my right hand, and so I was wearing, I forget what they're called, but anyway, a long jacket so that it would cover my wrist and go from there, a duster, and tried to look a little bit country for the acts as appropriate. So there we were, and it was before the show when we were meeting the artists. They were doing a meet and greet with some winners, but I wanted to talk to them about some record company things and get some things signed, as Steve had mentioned earlier, with other artists. So while we were there, I saw Kenny Rogers first, and a lovely man, and came over, and we were chatting back and forth. And he said, "Hey, wait a minute, what'd you do to your wrist?" And I said, "Oh, I broke it. You weren't supposed to see it." And he said, "Well, I'd like to sign it." Well, all I could think about was my girlfriend at the time saying to me, "Don't you dare get anybody to sign that cast, Kevin Shea, because I know darn well that when it gets taken off, you're gonna keep it, and it's gonna be kept on a shelf, and it's gonna be moldy and whatever." So I said, "Kenny, no, thanks anyway. No, I'm good." He said, "No, let me sign that cast." So he signed it on one side, and that was nice. And Dolly was standing with a little bit of an entourage, 3 or 4 ladies that she was on tour with at the time, did her makeup and hair and things of that sort. And so she wandered over, and I wish I could do the voice, but I can't. But she has the cutest little sweet voice with the accent. And she said, "Well, if Kenny can sign it, I've got to sign it too." And I said, No, Dolly, you don't understand. No, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. But no, I'm not going to get the cast signed. She, "Oh, yes, you are, Kevin." She said, "Okay, so give it to me." I said, "Oh, okay." So she took my hand, and she was up close. She looked over at her girlfriends, and with a wink, she placed my hand right on her décolletage, on her bosom.
Her ample bosom.
There, and I was so shy, and I try and be a gentleman, and I'm trying to curl my fingers up so that there's no flesh that touches her flesh, and she kept it there for an extended period of time just to make me squirm and turn red, and finally she signed it.
Let's see, how do I spell Dolly again?
That's a pretty good Dolly.
So there we are. So she signed it, and yes, I do have the cast at home, and the girlfriend's long gone, but the cast is still there. So there we are. Kenny and Dolly signed my wrist
great.
cast. There we
I
are.
love it. I just remembered. Okay, I want to get back to Atlantis for a second. I know why I was kind of linked. Why was I going back to Atlantis? Okay, 2 quick hits here. One is that Sharon Taylor on the live stream says that Alanis Morissette was a terrible driver. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if you experienced that in your time with her. She seems to be aware of this. Okay. And I was going to ask you, Steve, during your time with Alanis, was Taylor Hawkins part of the band?
Yes,
right?
he was. And he was such a great rock and roll human being. Like he was so I mean, his enthusiasm for the rock and roll music was crazy, and we loved being around him. I really don't have much more to say than that.
No, that was.
Just,
I mean, we talk about shocking things, and
Absolutely.
when I saw that I think it came across my Twitter feed. I'm like, what? Like, no, but sad but true. Yeah. Taylor Hawkins, what a rock star! I have seen Foo Fighters, but did not see Alanis Morissette live when Taylor was with her.
You guys all know, I'm sure, but he started with Sass Jordan, who's a Canadian artist as well.
And an FOTM.
Oh, very good. Wow.
And I was at a Jays game the other night, and every time someone hits a double, they break into double trouble, like just a little bit of it. Oh, double trouble.
Very good.
Very well sung. I like your falsetto too.
Well, that's all I got. It's just pure falsetto.
We could do a
I'm
song.
looking for something on the other end of the range. Absolutely. I can do, is it, what's Tiny Tim's song called?
Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
Tiptoe through the tulips.
I worked with him once upon a time, too, so, oh, my goodness.
What was he like?
Well, so he was lovely, lovely man, but he wears so much perfume and skin conditioner and whatever that when I went to meet him, it was so overwhelming that I thought I was going to be sick. Yeah.
Too much.
Anyway, and has the softest hands, and he called me. I was going by, I was working in radio at the time, and my name was Sky Kelly, so I was Mr. Kelly all afternoon while I spent time with Tiny Tim. But yeah, he was a lovely, lovely man, and we talked about hockey because he's a big hockey fan, and he loves the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I think I've seen him in a jersey. I've seen him in a Leaf jersey. There's one, you see those photos of there's David Letterman in a Leaf jersey, and
Oh, I collect them all too. So, oh geez, yeah, big fan. He had listened to them on the radio. He'd listened to a New York Rangers game and heard the Toronto Maple Leafs and just liked the name, and so he became a Maple Leafs fan. And he would go to the odd Rangers game, but he would wave a Toronto Maple Leafs pennant. So people would pelt him. First of all, he looked so strange. It's the 60s. But people would throw beer at him and pelt him with hot dogs and things of that sort. But he dreamed of being Mr. Sawchuk, and he would deflect the hot dogs and the beer away from him by pretending he was Terry Sawchuk.
Steve, am I right? Is that the ideal Kevin Shea story? Because he gets to talk Leafs and music in the same story.
Oh, absolutely. Kevin has been able to weave hockey into pretty much every story he's ever told.
It's true.
Sure, it's more than just 50 mission cap. He can do it all. Ace Frehley, lead guitar. I don't know the story. I just know there is a story. So, Steve, it's your job to tell me the story. What is the story about your run-in with Ace Frehley of Kiss?
Okay, well, since
Google's answering me because it seems to know the story, but you go
Really?
ahead. Yeah.
Well, since the story, the Ace Frehley story is so incredibly short, I will tell you another Kiss story first.
Okay. I like the opening act.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Because that story would be the headliner.
Well, okay, which story should be that? Well, actually, okay. So here's the Ace Frehley story because there's so
which
many.
Is the better story should close, okay? So whatever the weaker story
so
is.
Here's the Ace Frehley story. The better story will close.
Okay.
Thank you for arranging my stories in a much more cohesive manner.
Just hold my hand, Steve. I can help you.
Hold my
And then get me Jim Cuddy on this damn program. What the hell is he waiting for? What is he waiting? Do you know how many times I've seen Blue Rodeo live? Many, many times. Big fan. Come on.
Okay, I'm going to just text. Anyway, okay. So I was working for Aucoin Management in New York City.
Right.
And Aucoin were the people that managed Kiss back in the 70s. They weren't managing Kiss anymore. They were managing Billy Idol. And when I say they, I'm talking about Bill Aucoin. So he was managing Billy Idol. Anyway, it was one of my last weeks, if not my last week, then the second last week that I was living in New York and I was about to move back to Toronto. It was a rainy day, and I was going back up to the offices of Aucoin, and our offices were actually in his apartment building, in his apartment at the Olympic Towers on 53rd and 5th. And I was coming up 6th Avenue and about to turn on the 53rd, and it's raining. And from across the street, I hear, "Steve! Hey, Steve! Steve!" And I look across the street, and it's Ace Frehley waving at me, hello. And being a huge Kiss fan from the time I was 15 or 16, it's like, oh my God, Ace Frehley knows who I am, and he's calling me across the street. This is the greatest thing ever. But it wasn't necessarily the greatest thing ever.
Oh.
Because I'm going to now tell you the story that was the greatest Kiss story of my life. So I was the office boy at Aucoin Management, and part of my responsibility was to head across town to the Aucoin warehouse. Well, this warehouse that was on the Hudson River, and I could say East River, Hudson River, on the Hudson River, and I would take files over there, and I would bring files back. And they were in the, it was one of those storage rooms where you have, hundreds of storage rooms.
Sure.
so I would get a little box, and it had a bunch of keys in it, and I would take the keys, and I would go into the room, and I would unlock them. Well, one of the keys, even though he didn't manage Kiss anymore, one of the keys was for the Kiss locker room. And for the first 6 months, I wouldn't go. I would kind of peek in, but I wouldn't go in. One day, I was feeling like, to hell with it. And so I took the key, and I opened up the door, and I went in, and it was all of their old costumes.
Wow.
From various tours. Wow. And I'm like, and I start wandering around the room, and the lights are on. It's really bright. There's a mirror in there, and it's just like all these. And I'm looking around, and I go and I close the door. And then I'm like, walk over to Gene Simmons' Demon Boots, and I put the Demon Boots on.
Wow.
And then I see over there that Paul Stanley back, I think around the time of Kiss Alive, had these armbands that had black feathers that came out of them. So I put the armbands on. And then I saw Ace Frehley's cape and wings from the Dynasty tour. So I went over and I put those on. And then I opened up a guitar case that had one of Paul Stanley's Gibson Marauder guitars. And it had a strap. So I put that on. And then I went and I stood in front of a mirror and I performed Rock and Roll All Night. And I do not have a photo to prove that. So this could be as big a lie as my opening lie today.
We'll never know, which is what makes it great. Amazing. By the way, there's a Toronto Mike sticker for you, Steve. That's courtesy of stickeru.com. You're a promo guy, so you know that you need good stickers. And this is one for you, Kevin Shea.
Thank you very
Toronto
much, Mike.
Mike sticker. Thank you, Sticker U, for I think four years and counting of amazing support, helping to fuel the real talk over here. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to save because people love a Weird Al Yankovic story. And I almost feel like maybe he's bigger than, can he be bigger than ever? Like the love for Weird Al feels like it's still rising here. So I'm going to save that. So we're going to come back to that. But is there a Jennifer Warren story? She had a very big promo rider, a tour rider. What's going on, Jennifer?
Well, she did. Lovely, lovely lady again, and just delightful. She had worked with Steve before at Attic Records, and he was instrumental in breaking her with the album of Leonard Cohen covers. So
Famous Blue Raincoat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. 200,000 copies in Canada before Kevin Shea started.
See, there we are.
Wow.
So when my turn came along, it was a re-release of that, but there were also some other projects that came along. So I really thought it'd be wise to bring her into town. So she was dealing with I was dealing with her manager, who was a former a Hells Angels biker. Wish I could remember his name. Buddha, there we are, that's right. Scared silly dealing with him because he was tough as can be. He also managed Jackson Browne. And so he said, well, yes, we can make that happen. And Jennifer had been very, very sweet and called me and said, oh, I'd love to come up there. And it sounds like, first of all, I love Attic Records in Canada. And you sound like a lovely man, Kevin. So deal with Buddha, and he'll send you the requirements. Well, we were using fax at the time, and I can't remember how many pages, but I think it was 32 pages.
Yeah, 34 pages.
Boy, of requirements that she would insist on. So she would do 3 interviews and then have to break for a massage. She could do no more than 6 interviews through the course of a day. She had to stay in a boutique hotel, so we put her at St. Clair and Avenue Road in what's now a senior's residence. We put her there. She had to have outwardly opened windows. She couldn't be on the first floor. She couldn't be within 5 rooms of the elevator. It went on and on and on. She had to have a certain kind of tea that I had to import from the U.S., and she had to have that break at 3 o'clock, I think it was, or something along that line. It just went on and on and on. So I thought, okay, I'll get my nerve up. And I said, Buddha, why are we doing this? And she said, well, Kevin, she's a mature woman, and we have to look after her. And we'll see how good a promotion person you are and see how good Attic Records is by how well you deliver. Well, I delivered because there's no way I was going to go up against Buddha or help her lose the deal with Attic Records. But she and I hit it off very well. We still keep in touch and move forward. But she came and she did all the interviews. She was delightful, and so she at one point she said, "You were such a darling, Kevin, and to go through all of those steps, I'm surprised." And I said, "Well, that's what was required." She says,
"It's your job, right?"
Oh no, Buddha just puts it out there just to see how much he can push the envelope, and you were a darling and did them all. You're the only one who's ever done it. So I said, well, there we go, great. But yeah, she was a lovely date.
It's a bit like the Van Halen, no brown M&Ms or whatever. It's just to see who's paying attention, right? It's like that's your, and you were the only guy who delivered those 34 pages of ridiculous wants and needs.
Crazy. I still have that curled up fax at home because I couldn't believe how. It was on that onion skin type paper, but it was just brutal to think of what.
See, I would have made a lousy rep because I'd be thinking, like, who do you think you are? Like, let's get some perspective here.
It's not that I didn't think it; I just didn't do it. That's for sure.
So, Steve, let me ask you this: what would you have done if you had been faxed the 34 pages for Jennifer?
Well, first of all, I would have. I want to say that when I worked with her, it was before we had gone double platinum. So the only two requests out of your whole list were the windows opening up and the tea.
She had some momentum behind her when she came to me. Jeez.
Honestly, similar. I would have tried to do everything. I wouldn't have tried as hard as Kevin. I would have like if there were things that I couldn't get, I just wouldn't get them. I wouldn't go above and beyond. I mean, there's only like the tea, for instance, that he may have had a problem with was easy for me because my mother and brother are both macrobiotic vegetarians, so it was easy for me to know where to go to get the tea. But yeah, I'm it's me first. me, I, me some more.
So I want another Steve story, but Kevin, I want you to pick it. Like you select a story you'd like to hear from Steve Waxman.
Oh, well, I think he mentioned Ace of Spades earlier on. I'd love him to tell the story of Motorhead.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen.
Tell it, because Ace of Spades is having a comeback because it was used prominently in Severance. I don't know if you've seen this series, but it's a popular series on Apple TV.
Yeah, I don't have Apple TV. Otherwise, I would be watching it. I don't have HBO, too, so please don't mention any HBO
but all
shows.
the good shows are on HBO, so that's it. Just don't watch TV then.
So when I was working at Attic, we had a Motorhead record called Orgasmatron. And the band was on tour promoting Orgasmatron, and they were opening for Alice Cooper. I arranged for 2 interviews for Lemmy to do. Lemmy and actually Filthy Animal Taylor to do Q107 and Much Music. So the Much Music interview was to be them co-hosting the Power Hour for 1 hour. Okay, I go over to Maple Leaf Gardens to pick them up from the tour bus. Now, I'm driving a Mazda 626. Just for anybody that knows the Mazdas, you know that this is not a limousine. Okay, just
right.
So I knock on the bus door, and the tour manager comes out, and Lemmy and Filthy Animal Taylor both come out of the bus, and they climb. Filthy goes into the back seat. And Filthier, or Lemmy, comes sits in the front seat. The first thing they say to me is, "We need some Jack Daniels." And I'm like, "Well, we have interviews to do, guys. So I'm going to take you to the interviews. And after the interviews, I'll go get you some Jack Daniels." And they say to me, "We won't do the interviews unless we have Jack Daniels."
Right.
And I'm like, "Well, we're running late. I got to get you to Q107 to do the interview. So why don't I get you to Q107, set you up with the interview, and then I'll run downstairs to the liquor store and get you the Jack Daniels." And they said to me, "We won't do the interviews without the Jack Daniels, so you'll have to get the Jack Daniels first."
Right.
And this goes right to your question earlier about Jennifer Warnes, I suppose. And I said to them, "Well, how about this? Let's go up to Q107. You guys start the interview. I'll run down to the liquor store. I'll get the Jack Daniels, and then I'll come up and meet you here. They begrudgingly agreed. So Joey Vendetta comes out and meets the guys, and I tell him what's going on, and he looks at them and says, I'm sorry, guys, but because of what happened with Motley Crue, we can't allow liquor in the studio.
And that's a Kevin story. That's a Kevin story. That's one of yes, we heard that the first time.
All right. So now you know Kevin's story was real. So they go in, they do the interview with Joey. I go downstairs, and remember, I don't drink. I don't know nothing about liquor. So I have to ask them to help me, I need a bottle of Jack Daniels. Well, what size, sir?
Right.
I'm like, anyway.
You're out of your comfort zone.
Right. So I get them Jack Daniels. I go back upstairs. They haven't started doing the interview yet. They're sitting in the studio with Joey Vendetta, and they're refusing to talk because I haven't got the Jack Daniels. So I go to the door, and I hold up the bottle to the window so that they see that I have the bottle. They do the interview with him. They come out. We go down to the car because now, we're on the clock because, the Power Hour is live.
Right.
We're driving down to Much Music. They start drinking out of the bottle.
Jeez.
We get to Much. Simon Evans, who was the producer of the Power Hour, goes, guys, you can't drink. We can't have that bottle on air. So it was the Pepsi Power Hour. He gave each of them a Pepsi cup, and they poured the Jack Daniels into the Pepsi cup. Now, if you can find the interview on the YouTube, and I've never found it, but if you can find it, you will see two English fellas, getting drunk over the course of the next hour.
I'll bet.
Towards the end of the interview, and they've gone through most of the bottle, if not all of it, I don't remember exactly. But towards the end of the interview, what we needed to do was a live stand-up promo. There was an Orgasmatron poster that I was to have signed by all of the band that somebody from one of the viewers of the Power Hour was going to write in to win. So the guys are holding up the poster while I think it was Christopher Ward was hosting that day, although it could have been Teresa Roncon. I don't remember exactly who the host was.
I think Ward was gone by then.
It's entirely possible. Yeah, it was probably Teresa then. So the guys are holding up the poster while the promo is running live, and they start eating the poster live on air.
But would you know what? That's rock and roll, man. I feel like that's perfect.
It's not over. So now I need to get this poster signed. So I leave it with the road manager, who promises that they will sign it, and I can come pick it up after their set, after they've opened for Alice Cooper.
Right.
So I'm there, and I'm a Motorhead fan, and I can sit through Motorhead shows forever. I love it. Yeah. The band finishes playing. I go to the dressing room backstage at Maple Leaf Gardens, and I knock on the door, and nobody answers. And nobody's answering. Nothing. Alice Cooper goes on stage, plays his entire set. I don't see a lick of it. He plays his entire set, an hour and a half. Yeah. Comes off stage. Crew starts unloading. That door has not opened yet. Everybody leaves. The door has still not opened. I'm banging on the door. It's 12:30, I think, now. Finally, the door opens. The poster is on the floor. There are footprints all over it. And the guys are just sitting there, and they're laughing. I take my Sharpie, and I walk up to Lenny, and I went, I don't care. Sign it. So he signs it, and I go over to Filthy, and I went, I don't care. Sign it. And he signs it. I don't know who the guitar player was at the time. I went over to the guitar player. Same thing. It's your turn. Signs it. I roll it up. I leave. End of story. A year later, I'm at Rock and Roll Heaven for some show. The road manager is working with whomever the headlining act is, and I wasn't working the show. I was just there to see whoever was playing play. And the road manager recognizes me and goes, hey, you're that guy from last year, right, with Motorhead? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, look, man, I'm really, really sorry, but the band had decided before they rolled into Toronto, regardless of who the promo rep was going to be, they were going to give him a hard time.
Right.
And it had to be you.
Jeez. Whoa.
That's great story. Now, but you mentioned Joey Vendetta, so I just watched the it's the station you don't get, Crave, had a documentary about Triumph. And I watched the Triumph documentary. And what I found strange is Joey's in this thing, but they won't bill him as Joey Vendetta. They bill him by his real name, Joey Scolari. So I just... And
Pino Scolari, actually.
That's true.
Oh.
Pino Scolari, that's right.
Okay, but I do think they call him Joey Scolari. Yeah,
that's
but
sure.
I just don't... I find that curious. Like, is that elite? Was there some... Like, why wouldn't they just bill him as the name all the Triumph people know him as? Like, why not call him Joey Vendetta?
He had gone to work with Live Nation, and they insisted that, or maybe it was his choice.
You think of the Live Nation thing.
It was either him or Live Nation, but he decided that to be a professional that he should use his proper name at that
but
point.
when he was doing all that Fan 590 stuff during the Live Nation, he was suddenly Vendetta again. So it's, come on, pick a lane. But anyway, I don't think anyways, he did a controversial tweet that got him.
He did, absolutely. But
I think it might have cost him a 590 morning show gig, possibly, but that's just a rumor out there. What do I know? Careful what you tweet, Kevin. By the way, Kevin, what is you have a new Twitter handle that looks like a Russian bot.
Somebody absconded with my old one, and that just came up when I...
It was whatever Twitter decided you should be, and you just clicked OK.
So I don't really tweet very much anymore. I like to... I read it a great deal, but Facebook is my...
Facebook's your place to play.
Yeah, it's my social media place.
Okay, listen, now, I know we said we'll go as long as we want, but at the 2-hour mark, you guys are going to start to fall asleep. So, give me... Even though there's a lot of this with that Motley Crue story, there's a lot of this in your first visit to Toronto Mike, which people should check out. But I need some Weird Al. I need a Weird Al fix because you were kind of joined at the hip with Weird Al Yankovic. Remind us how you worked with Weird Al and give us a Weird Al story or two.
Sure. So Weird Al was signed to Scotty Brothers Records, which was distributed in Canada by Attic Records. So, Steve, did you work with Al at all?
No, it was right just as I was leaving.
Okay, so then I picked it up from there. And we really hit it off. I was a big Dr. Demento fan in my youth. I loved it. I had loved Weird Al's music. I had been a music director at different stations, and we always played his stuff in the morning shows and went from there. So I was a big fan already. So to work with Weird Al Yankovic was pretty special. Now, going back to the previous story with Nirvana, that was the last act I worked at MCA Records. It was now Universal Records. So Smells Like Teen Spirit was the very last project I worked at MCA Universal. The very first act I worked at Attic was Weird Al Yankovic with Smells Like Nirvana.
Right.
There was a period of time where I had the Nirvana multi-platinum beside Weird Al's.
It lets you be the baby
well.
again, which is really what you wanted all along.
I don't know about that. But anyway, all good. But I really hit it off well with Al. And so I asked if he could come up here for a promo tour, and he was more than willing to do exactly that. And so I dealt with his manager for the most part, a guy named Jay Levy, and a great guy. But I dealt with Al directly as well. And I was saying, so listen, can I call you by your first name? He said, well, sure, I'd like you to do that. Okay, so Weird. And I kept calling him Weird, and he would get angry. So then he started calling me Stinky. So I knew that I was not to call him Weird anymore as his first name. It was Al or Weird Al. So off we went. He said, listen, Kevin, I asked him the parameters of what he could do, and he said, look, you can't work me hard enough. I said, wait a minute, that's a challenge. He said, no, seriously, you can't work me hard enough. I said, okay, here we go. So we booked interviews from 6 a.m. right through until midnight. But the key here was, and then I was able to arrange for Much Music to do
Al TV. Dude,
right.
I loved Al TV.
Oh, it was so good and so
clever. But I did not know at the time that there was a Al Music or whatever they did in the
Al TV was in the U.S.
Okay, so what was ours called? Okay,
yeah.
So I loved Al Music, but I did not know it had been done as Al TV in the USA.
He would scalp a few of the bits that he used in that one, but for the most part, it was created anew. So we worked hard all day, but he had this amazing ability to catnap. And when I mean catnap, if I was going from Canada AM in Scarborough and then going downtown, he could fall asleep instantaneously for that 20 minutes and go from there so that he could get his rest. And then he would go all night again.
Amazing.
Recording, editing the Al Music specials for Much Music as well. So he worked 24 hours a day with those catnaps in between interviews. But he was a delightful guy to work. The funny thing is he does all of these food bits and he has the wackiest food combinations. But in real life, he's a vegan and a very staunch vegan as well. So we would go to Freshie and have our our meals, and they would see Weird Al. They couldn't believe that Weird Al was in the Freshie on Queen Street or whatever it happened to be. But he, a staunch vegetarian, a staunch vegan rather, and a non-drinker, and a lady magnet. He is a wacky guy, and that's his persona. But the real Al Yankovic is probably the most intelligent person I've ever met. He's brilliant. He's got bless you. He's got his degree in architecture. He's he's just a brilliant guy who just did this as a bit, and it turned out to be a 20, 30-year bit that continued on. But he's really nice. He's very, very shy. But the ladies, he's married and has a lovely daughter as well now. But when he was single, it was amazing how, I don't know what he did or didn't do, but
real talk.
It was amazing that no matter where we went, the number of people there, teenagers, lovely ladies who were in their 30s and 40s, were there to meet Al. They had to meet Al. So whether it's the cult of personality or whatever it happened to be.
You want me to help you out here? I know this, okay? The most attractive thing about a man is their sense of humor, okay?
No wonder you've got such a beautiful wife, Steve.
Is that Steve's secret? I thought it was the singing voice.
Well, it plays together, right? We have a lot of fun with that. But Al was a really hard worker. We brought him up. Every time there was a new album, the tour would come up here. In fact, we were back and forth by way of email last week, and somebody quoted, I can't remember the magazine, but they quoted him for a Canada Day piece talking about Canada.
Oh, Exclaim.
Was it?
It was Exclaim.
Okay. Talking about how...
At the Sutton place. Right after he finishes his gig at the Blue Note.
See, that's why. Anyway, he talked about how important Canada was. His sales were by percentage-wise were incrementally more than they were in the U.S., and how people often thought that he was Canadian because he spent so much time here and did so many things. And he said, "Listen, I should have put your name in there, Kevin." But I said, "No, nobody would know or care about that." But he was wonderful to deal with, the hardest working artist I ever dealt with, and just loved. So he'll be coming through town in the next little bit, and I'll get a chance to see him again. And
okay.
Then there's the Weird Al movie coming out this fall as well.
Which, by the way, was a Funny or Die trailer. They did a trailer like, I don't know, maybe seven years ago or something. There was a Funny or Die trailer where they called it, Weird, I think it was. And it was pretending
I saw that. Yeah,
which is basically what this movie is going to be. But the trailer was amazing. Like this trailer that was done several years ago for Funny or Die was just perfect.
Well, the odd thing to me, so I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, although I did go to see the theatrical production last week. Didn't understand it, but really enjoyed it. But the star from Harry Potter, his name, Steve?
Daniel Radcliffe.
Thank you, is Weird Al in the film. It seemed like the oddest bit of casting ever, but Al said it really, really worked, so...
I know. I look forward to seeing it. But that trailer that was done several years ago, it was Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And that was also just fantastic.
Yeah. No, it's going to be...
Okay.
It'll be quite a film.
So the future of Toronto Mike. Okay, let's get down to it. Okay, so Jim Cuddy will be coming soon. And Weird Al Yankovic is coming soon. Because you're going to say, hey, you want to be cool, Weird? You want to do something really weird? Go to this guy's basement.
Let me try and see.
You'll join him to make sure no funny business goes on.
Oh, you want funny business with Al. Jeez.
I think, we mentioned Dolly Parton earlier, and I was thinking, is there a more beloved celebrity than Dolly Parton? Well, Weird Al's right up there, too. They might be the two, those two and Tom Hanks, maybe. We'll put them in a big boat or something. Okay. So, this is not last chance, but we're winding down here. But, Kevin, is there another story from Steve Waxman? Or, Steve, maybe you want to volunteer a great story. Because then I'm going to go back to Kevin with see if he has anything to say about Guns and fucking Roses.
Oh, my God. Well, let me just, if I can just group a bunch of stories together.
Sure. Bundle them up.
This would be the rapid fire round.
Love it.
I am a guitar player. I love the rock and roll. Whew. I have had the good fortune to work with pretty much every single one of my guitar heroes. Eddie Van Halen, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Brian May, Ace Frehley, and Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick. I have a story about each and every one of them, and I'll make them all really short. Okay. So start with Eddie Van Halen. I was down in L.A. with Much Music, and we were doing an interview for one of the Van Halen records with Sammy Hagar. I think it was for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, I'm thinking, or Balance, one of those two. Actually, it was Balance. Okay, it was Balance. Doesn't really matter. Anyway, Janelyn White, who was doing the interview for Much Music, was doing a story for the new music called Guitar Face, about all the different faces that guitar players make when they're doing solos. And she asked Eddie if he would be kind enough to play a solo that they could use as the walking intro. So he would be in the studio playing the solo, and he said, sure, no problem. I just need to warm up. It was me and Eddie Van Halen in a room. Seriously, their studio is not that much bigger than this, although the ceiling's a little bit higher.
I hope so.
Yeah, but in terms of square footage, it's this size. Me and Eddie Van Halen, each sitting on an amp 3 or 4 feet away from each other, and he's playing Eruption.
Wow.
That was unbelievable.
Is that a pinch me moment where you're okay, this is happening?
I cannot believe I have this job and this is
okay,
happening.
that's how I felt when Kevin Shea made his debut on Toronto Mike. Is this happening? Okay, go on. Great.
Jimmy Page was in Toronto. We were launching the re-release, the remixed or remastered version of the Presence album. And we had this event happening at the Masonic Temple. And we were playing the album back several cuts from the album back for all of these fans that were sitting. There was about 100 fans there, and he was doing an interview with Jeff Woods. Jimmy Page and I are sitting at the back of the room, basically beside one another, while they're playing Achilles' Last Stand, which is, a 10-minute song that deserves air drumming. And the two of us are air drumming together. And at the crescendo of the song ends, the two of us look at each other and high-five one another.
Wow. Wow.
That was incredible. Jeff Beck, who's my favorite guitar player of all time, I was turned on to guitar playing, rock and roll, and everything. Jeff Beck and the Yardbirds in Blow Up. So I'm working with Jeff Beck when he was here in Toronto playing with Eric Clapton. And he's doing a couple of interviews earlier in the afternoon. And after the interviews were done, I'm like, I just got to tell you that you're the reason I play guitar. And the reason I play guitar is because of Blow Up. And he goes, well, all I did in that movie was smash up a guitar. And I went, I was 10 years old. Just imagine what that felt like, watching somebody break a guitar like that.
Right.
And he goes, and he starts laughing. And I went, that being said, though you're my favorite guitar player of all time, and you're my biggest influence, I never tried to play guitar like you. And he looked at me and goes, well, really, what would be the point?
He's right.
Brian May could be the best of them all, so I should probably leave it last. Rick Nielsen, it was Cheap Trick was opening for Kiss on, I think they were promoting their first record because the second record hadn't come out yet. And a friend of mine was a writer for, do you remember Cheap Thrills magazine? Remember Cheap Thrills? Bass had a club where you're too young, right? You're not 50 yet?
No.
Oh my God, never mind. Okay. Anyway, I was in Kitchener with a friend of mine who was doing an interview with Cheap Trick on their first record.
Okay.
And I had just started playing guitar and wanted to start learning how to play lead guitar. And I said to Rick Nielsen, can you give me any tips? He goes, have you ever seen me play? And I went, no. And he goes, well, I just move my fingers all around and I play really, really loud. So watch me play. And sure enough, I stood by on the floor, but right by where he was, and he spent the entire gig just holding his guitar out and just flicking his fingers on the guitar neck. So okay, that was the Brian Wilson story. Not Brian. Sorry,
no, we had
Brian
that
May.
one.
And Brian May, which would be the end story. So Brian May was here on a solo tour, and his drummer was Cozy Powell, and I loved Cozy Powell because I was a big Ritchie Blackmore and Rainbow fan, and Cozy Powell was the drummer back then. But that's neither here nor there. That's a whole other story, and we're not talking about Cozy Powell right now. We are talking about Brian May. So we're sitting there, and we're at Splendido's when it was in Yorkville. so on Harvard. Sorry, Splendido's on Harvard. And we had this room downstairs. And it wasn't a private room, but it was a room downstairs where it was away from most of the other people. And we had a long table. It was the whole crew and the band and everybody. There were these 4 kids that were sitting at another table away from us. And they were those rich kids that got to spend their parents' money all the time. And they were having their dinner, and we were having our dinner, and we were having great conversation. And these kids had these flaming sambucas. And they would lick their fingers, and they would put it into the flaming sambuca, and they would come out, and their fingers would be on fire, and then they would lick their fingers free of the of the liquor and the fire. Well, we all found it really fascinating. These kids bought flaming sambucas for everybody at our table.
Jeez.
Brian takes the flaming sambuca, puts his finger in his mouth, puts it in the finger, and holds it up, and starts laughing at everybody. It's like, look it, my finger's on fire. And I turned to him and I went, Brian, your hair.
Wow.
Oh, jeez. Oh.
The end.
Oh.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. No, all killer, no filler on the bundle or whatever we're calling that. That was a great collection. Okay. Well, now guitarists. Okay. Now I'm thinking of Slash. Guns N' fucking Roses, because that should have been their proper name. Any Guns N' Roses stories from you, Kevin Shea, before we say goodbye?
Not really, but we
okay,
had them come through.
Well,
really, we should have ended with that because we ended on a high. But
well, I'm not going to fix it in post.
No,
so.
Guns N' Roses were the biggest act in the land at that point. They were for a number of years, and so any time that they were coming through on tour, they didn't come through and do any promo or anything, but when they came through on tour, we looked forward to seeing them, and we would do some kind of a presentation for Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, Triple Platinum, whatever it happened to be at that particular time. I guess it was earlier on than that. So it was a conference, and we had all of the people from MCA Universal there, but we had flown in key music directors from across the country as well to see them because nobody had seen them or very few had seen them.
So is this like point. Appetite for Destruction?
It would have been Appetite for Destruction.
Okay, that was new. Yeah.
And so, but it had broken it. Although they were opening, it seems to me, for the Cult in the show. I can't remember exactly, but it was an outdoor show and at the CNE it was indeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
They were staying at Sutton Place. They had an after show. Where was it? I think it was at the Blue Note.
It was Whitney Houston entertained. No.
Exclaim covered it.
But that era when GNR is opening for the Cult, that's a short period of time because Welcome to the Jungle. I remember it was in the Deadpool with Clint Eastwood. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It was in the trailers for the Deadpool, and the best part of that freaking movie was the trailer that had Welcome to the Jungle in it.
But it took forever to break this album. It took forever because, again, sonically it was different than anything else that was going on there.
I find this fascinating only because you heard the Q107 dog. Steve, you got to hear the Q107 Mike-umentary, episode 1071. But I was, at that time, I had listened to the Top 10 at 10. I think it was Shirley MacLaine who was doing it, but I was listening to Top 10 at 10, and it felt like the Top 10 at 10 felt like Appetite for Destruction, like just.
Well, and Joey Vendetta was a huge supporter, huge supporter, and so he was doing a show called The Power Factory, and so he was really supporting it that way. But so people were aware that the song had started to break now, and it was big, and we had all these people there, and we're gonna do the big presentation to the band, and nowhere to be seen. In fact, they never came out. So the next day, I went to the hotel just to make sure they were okay and go from there. And Axl, we waited for Axl for, I'm guessing, 2 hours, and he never did come out. And the other guys didn't either. But we came, and there were Duff and Slash sitting outside of their hotel room on the floor outside. And hey, I can't remember. I don't think they knew my name, but anyway, hey, you're the guy from MCA or whatever. Yeah. Just wanted to see if you guys are okay. It was Duff's bachelor party last night, so we partied pretty damned hard. But if you need anything from us today, we'll do it. So I called a few people really quickly, and Slash and Duff did some interviews. But through the entire time that I was with MCA Universal, through Appetite for Destruction and Use Your Illusion, etc., we never did meet Axl. But the other guys were great to deal with, wonderful to deal with.
Okay, so why don't you choose then? You cherry pick your closing story. And I was thinking, since you guys must have 100, maybe 1 million of these stories, we could do a sequel. Like you guys could come back at some point and we could, tell more stories.
Or bring other reps.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
To still tours
I know you want to
too,
replace Steve. Yeah, of course.
No, not at all. So you heard the Motley Crue story the first time around, as I recall. So that's my favorite story. But
well, you know what? Let's do it again.
Well, let me tell a different one.
Okay.
Or we can tell Motley Crue then. There we are.
You can tell the different one. You know what? You can tell both.
If the one that you tell instead of the Motley Crue isn't as good as the Motley Crue, then you tell the Motley Crue story as well. We'll judge.
Like, I don't want to leave a story on the cutting room floor because it was told last time. Like, I want this to be, go big or go home. So tell both. Go ahead, Kevin. The microphone is yours.
So let me start with Judy Collins.
Send in the clown. It's great, Leonard Cohen.
So I try and mix hockey whenever I can, and this was the situation. I was working at Attic Records, and Judy Collins, who had big hits in the 60s with Both Sides Now, and as you sang, in the 70s with Send in the Clowns, and she was certainly a big star in her day. She had a Christmas album. And
she helped break Leonard Cohen, right? Because didn't she have hits with Leonard Cohen before? She broke
Judy Collins, or Joni Mitchell, rather, for all intents and purposes.
She didn't do Suzanne?
Yeah, I feel only because I had the Leonard Cohen biographer I had on. It sounds like Judy Collins was covering like early Leonard songs and having hits with them,
like blowing in the wind and things like that.
Well, that would be Bob
Suzanne
Dylan,
for sure. Yeah, that's Bob Dylan. But Suzanne for sure, I think. Judy Collins had hit with it.
Might be right, but she certainly had.
You're sure Leonard Cohen didn't do "Blowing in the Wind"?
He did, but I don't think he put it on a release.
Okay. I'm sorry, we've already screwed up your story, so I just figured I'd just jump right in.
This is the punchy part. This is the good stuff. Okay.
So Judy Collins had a live album and a Christmas album to put out, and it was on Attic Records, and it was her own label. Okay. So we were going to distribute it in Canada, and I was the VP of promotion and publicity, and so wanted to set something up. So I contacted her, and she didn't have a manager at that point, just contacted her directly and asked if there was any chance that she would come up for a promo visit.
Right.
And she said, I would love to do that. That would be wonderful. Could you set up enough interviews for me to make it worth my while? I said, absolutely. So I thought, okay, this is great. A day later, she called me and said, listen, could you be a doll? Are you a hockey fan by any chance? I said, hockey fan? I'm the biggest there is. And she said, well, you know what I would love to do is I would love to sing the anthem at a hockey game. I said, well, I'm sure I can arrange that. Are you open to it? She said, I'm totally into it. I said, okay, let me work on it. So I called over to Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, rather, and talked to a lady named Nancy Jilks, and she was in charge of the anthem singers at the time. And they were using different singers all the time. Not like now.
Although they are. There's a posting.
They're auditioning.
I think her era is done. Martine is done.
Steve and I have our audition in a couple of minutes here. So
I think Jim Cuddy got the job.
Yeah, there we go. So I called Nancy and I said, listen, I've got an artist by the name of Judy Collins, and I want to see if you would be open to her doing the anthem. And she said, well, I've never heard of her. I said, well, huge in the 60s and 70s. And
you start singing "Send in the Clowns."
I did that, and then I said, "Listen, is there anybody who's a little bit older who's there who might know?" And she said, "Hang on for a second, Ken, have you ever heard of Judy Collins?" He said, "Oh, my favorite." It was in fact Ken Dryden, who was the president of the Maple Leafs at that time. My favorite artist, book her. If we have a chance, book her. So we booked Judy Collins for this particular anthem.
That's great.
So all was good, and then she called me back a couple days later, and she said, I've sung it 100 times, but can you send me a recording of "O Canada"? I said, well, okay. So we had a CD by Michael Burgess on Attic Records, and he had performed "O Canada" on it, so I couriered it down to her, and you're a love, thank you so much. And then a couple days after that, can you write out the lyrics for me? I said, well, but you would know them from she said, well, just write them out for me. I said, okay, I'll write them out for you. And that was great. And then again, a couple days later, and she would sing it to me, and it was beautiful every time, just sensational every single time. And then she said, listen, can I take the lyrics out to sing the anthem? I said, well, that probably wouldn't fly. But if you think that it would help you, I'll get a portfolio for you, a nice leather portfolio. We'll put the lyrics in big. If you think it'll help, she said, I think it'll help. But I know it. Here, let me sing it one more time. And it was perfect. It was beautiful. It was sensational. So that's great. So she came up, and we had done a few interviews through the course of the day, and they were very well received. And I took her over to the rink. We had tickets for her and a couple of her bandmates who were coming up with her. They weren't performing, but they just wanted to come up with her to support. And I had my tickets up in the purples at that time at Scotia, at the Air Canada Centre at the time. So, and she looked resplendent. She was amazing. First of all, I picked her up at the airport, and she just looked beautiful, and those eyes, that prompted Sweet Judy Blue Eyes were so sensational, and she looked great, and she sang the song, the anthem to me several times in the car on the way in, and took her to the Four Seasons on Avenue Road, not too far from the Sutton Place, funny enough, and there we go.
155 Bay Street.
There we are. And so I took her to her room, and she said, would you come in and let me sing it to you one more time? I said, okay. And she sang it was perfect again. So it worked out well. So we did the interviews through the course of the day. I brought her back to her room. She changed, and she came out. She had a beautiful white dress, beautiful white stockings. She had done her hair really nicely, and she was all set. And I had the portfolio with the lyrics there too, and we were all set to go. And she sang it on the way over to the arena, and it was perfect. And we got there, and there was Nancy Jolks, and there was Ken Dryden, and a number of other people, and they all had things for her to sign, and she was just delightful, and they loved her. And then Andy Frost with the great voice, ladies and gentlemen, whatever, superstar, U.S. superstar, Judy Collins, and she sang the American national anthem. And then she kind of stopped. So I thought, she's probably waiting for me to bring the portfolio out, but then she kind of waved me off, and she waited and waited. It was awkward. It was an awkward length of time. And then she started to perform, and it went off the rails immediately. Oh, Canada, our home and sometimes land, whatever, I don't know. She went on, but the big thing that caused a furor was when she sang "In All Our Sons and Daughters' Command." And people were booing. They're throwing Pepsi cans or bottles, not bottles, but the Pepsi cups there at her. It's splashing up on her stockings and on her dress, but she continues on. And it was so bad, so bad. And the booing just got louder and louder and louder. And she brought it to a close. And that was it. And the booing was so loud. She came off and took my hand, and she said, all that testosterone in hockey players and hockey fans, I can't believe they would be like that so they could start the game. And I said, I looked around. There was no Ken Dryden, no Nancy Jolks. It was just the two of us now in the Zamboni exit. And I said, look at Judy, the anthem didn't work out the way that I had hoped or you had hoped. And if you had missung the American anthem, you would have had people doing the same thing. Well, it's the same thing here because you changed the lyrics around. And she said, oh, Pshaw, there's nothing like that. Listen, I don't really want to watch the game after all. Will you take me back to the hotel? So I drove her there and hurried back so I could use her great seats. And there we go. Well, that's all people talked about. It was in the hallways. Andy Frost on the post-game show. It was in the paper the next day. It was on the radio the next day about how she desecrated the Canadian national anthem. So I sent a fruit basket to Ken Dryden and flowers to Nancy Jolks. Nancy never did get the flowers. She still holds that over my head. And there we went. And so I picked. I went to Judy's office again, or to her hotel room again, and said, "Do you want to continue doing the interviews?" And she said, "Yes, I will." And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to run roughshod over this one and try and make sure that nobody talks about the anthem. We just talk about the releases. And everybody was respectful, and that was fine. So I took her back to the airport, and on the way, she said, Kevin, I have to tell you something. I said, oh, what's that? She said, well, I did an interview with the Globe and Mail, a lady named Jan Wong. And Jan was the one who told me that it was a sexist anthem, and that there was no way that I should be singing All Our Sons Command, and that's why I sang All Our Sons and Daughters Command. But I was thinking about it so much that it threw me off, and I forgot the lyrics, and that's what happened. So she went back home, and she sent me a lovely package of CDs and a fruit basket as well, and a note of apologies, and we do keep in touch a little bit now, but I remind her every once and again of our escapade. She was in town playing, I forget, was it Hughes Room, something like that, a couple weeks ago.
Yes, it was Hughes Room.
And she contacted me and said, "Remember our escapade?" Oh, yes, Judy, I do. And we both laughed and went from there. And I said, "You won't be doing the anthem tonight, I'm sure." And that was my Judy Collins story.
Love it. Amazing. I will say that I think that Sons and Daughters was an improvement. Well, I mean, today it's all of what is it now? All of our command.
All of us command.
Yep. All of us command. Yep. Right. And we just got to get God out of there and we're done, I think. So. Gentlemen, okay, we need a sequel because there's more stories to be told. But Steve Waxman, a hell of a debut. Welcome to the FOTM family. You were amazing, buddy.
Outstanding, Steve.
And you, Kevin, 2 for 2. I can't wait for your third visit. Always a pleasure. Man, you're a man of many talents. You can talk music. You can talk hockey. Always a great time.
Thanks for having us.
And that, by the way, the Motley Crue story is in Kevin Shea's first visit to Toronto, Mike. I'm going to make you go back and listen because there's a lot of other good stuff in there, too. And a lot of Leaf talk as well. And that brings us to the end of our 1083rd show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Steve, are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter, Fairway Stevie.
And by the way, Steve, what are you up to these days? I guess I started my song here, but what are you up to these days?
Generally, I've got the podcast, The Creationist.
Yes.
A podcast about people who create. I also do some communications for some private golf courses because, well, I love golf and I love to communicate and, play golf, practice my guitar.
And lunches with Blair Packham.
I
think he's a great storyteller. That would be entertaining to have lunch with Blair Packham.
Absolutely. And a great songwriter.
He's the last of the Red Hot Fools. That's what I say about him.
He was the first one as well.
And Kevin, we know you have a weird long Twitter handle, but how is it you want people to follow you? Did you say Facebook?
Probably is the best way to go.
Okay, so search for Kevin Shea on Facebook, and you'll find him there. Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Sticker U is at Sticker U. Doer are at Doer Performance. Ridley Funeral Home, they're at Ridley FH. And Canna Cabana are at Canna Cabana _. You'll like this, Kevin. Tomorrow morning, sitting in these seats, will be Damian Cox and Gord Stellick.
Should be a great show.
See you all then.
And I'll play this guitar just the best that I can.